Peace, peace. Touching this one, we're gonna get into this video. I'm gonna touch on Indian slavery. Start off by letting his brother Raymond Two Hawks speak on his experience and his tribal experience. Alright.
So if you were a young man, age 14 or older, and said that you were a Pokanoket, you could be shot dead on sight. So what is in is the traditional lands of the Pokanoket people, who are contemporarily referred to as Wampanoag. The reason they're referred to as Wampanoag is because after the King Philip's War, which is the bloodiest war per capita in U.S. history since colonization started, the colonists outlawed being Pokanoket. So if you were a young man, age 14 or older, and said that you were a Pokanoket, you could be shot dead on sight. So what they did for themselves were Seacops, the Tuckets, and then overall they became known as the Wampanoags. Now, after the King Philip's War, they beheaded King Philip, and his traditional name is Co-Medicon. King Philip was the name that the English colonists gave him, but his name was Co-Medicon. After the King Philip's War, in Patumtuck, which is the traditional seat of the Massasoit, and Massasoit is an Algonquin term that means great leader. The Massasoit was the leader of the Pokanoket Nation. The Massasoit, Osamequin was the one who leaded the Pilgrims, who signed the first peace treaty with the English, who had the first Thanksgiving with the Pilgrims. All of that took place in what's now called Bristol, Rhode Island, in this space called the Heaven Refuge. So after they defeated King Philip, they beheaded him, they quartered his body. Parts of it they left to be desecrated by the animals that are out there. The other parts they sent off to the different parts of the colonies as a warning to our people to never try something like that again. And then you had all this land that was there. So in addition to, killing King Philip, they sold some of his family off into slavery. They threw the rest of them onto reservations, and they were all set with the Pokanoket. So in addition to, killing King Philip, they sold some of his family off into slavery. They threw the rest of them onto reservations, and they were all set with the Pokanoket. They don't exist anymore. They Wampanoags or whatever they're called.
And they African Americans too. Now look. One thing I just don't like about a lot of these so-called Negroes that's in these tribes, with the exception of some of them. Some of them do tell you. He's not telling nobody. He's not telling the rest of the Negroes. Even though you can look at him, he's black. You go on his Facebook page, you see his pictures. All his family is Negroes. Like what he didn't. I don't think. What I'm saying. From my understanding, from me observing this or whatever. A lot of people are not saying, well, all right, because we're going to ask him, well, how are you connected to these tribes? And, us being silly, we'll think, oh, okay, he got African in him. Okay, all right, he has African in him. So his other side must be Native American. But when you look at his family, all his family look like Negroes. You understand what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying. And that's something that I feel like I want to touch on, like in all my videos, you always see I'm pointing out, I'm showing you the identity of how these so-called Native Americans are classified. Okay, all right, so you heard what he said. He said that half his people were sold into slavery, right? And the other ones is classified as other tribes. And like I said, in the other ones, he was classified as a Negro. I think he just found this out within the last 10 years. You know what I'm saying? Because me and him was friends on Facebook. And if you go look at his pictures, you go back to some of his older pictures, he's just like a Negro. You understand? And I know Negroes. I'm a Negro, so I mean, when I say Negroes, I'm just giving you an identity of a so-called copper color Aborigine person. I'm just using it interchangeable, all right? But when I say Negro, I'm just showing you, because most of us are identified as Negroes. Okay, so that's the separation from being an Indian and a Negro. All right, but nonetheless, though, that's something else. We're gonna get into something else. All right, so, all right, what he said. Let me just hope, man, my computer stick up, man, because my computer been acting real funny. All right, here we go. In 1637, it said, and I'm reading from the North American Indian timeline. Okay, use their sources. You know what I'm saying? All right, so we right here, 1637, saying the colony of Massachusetts, the Pequot Indian were the first slaves. But as they would not endure the yoke, they were sent to Bermuda in exchange for Negroes in hope that they would later bear slavery more patiently. The first exchange of Indians for Negroes was made in 1637, the first year the Pequot War, and was doubtless kept up for many years. All right, so they're saying that they was doing that for many years. All right, so this is his tribe of people right here that he was basically talking about. You know what I'm saying? The Massachusetts Pequot, or what? Because I believe the Pequot and the Wapanaki was the same tribes. But nonetheless, this is what he's talking about, and this is what led to King Philip's War. Right here, you see, as we go on along right here, 1675, 1676, a King Philip War erupted in New England between the colonists and Native Americans. As a result of tension over colonist expansion activities, the bloody war rages up and down the Connecticut River Valley in Massachusetts and in the Plymouth and Rhode Island colonies, eventually resulting in 600 English colonies being killed. They always say more natives was killed than the colonies, and 3,000 Native Americans, including women, children. Look, you see the difference when they tell you the natives, they say including women and children, but they say 600 English colonists being killed. Now they don't say that's what I'm saying. So when you go to King Philip's, the colonist nickname for Metacomic, that's what he was saying. This was his uncle name. I mean his grandfather name. They say chief of the Wampanoag. All right, say hunted down. So that's the thing too. There's another separate tribe, Wapanaki, which I done went over in other videos or whatever. You guys check that out. It say, all right, so it say is hunted down and killed on August 12, 1676 in the swamps in Rhode Island, ending the war in southern New England and ending the independent power of Native Americans there. In the New Hampshire and Maine and Saco Indian continued to raid settlements for another year and a half. All right, so this is basically what he was talking about. All right. Now, a lot of people don't even know about this so-called Indian slavery. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, they don't even know about it. And you hear a lot of people who claim that they know so much about so-called Aborigines and so-called North American, but they don't know that there was millions of so-called Aborigines shipped to the Caribbean. This is not the one I'm looking for. I'm looking for this one. Alright, this is article I found. American History, Oxford Research. Alright, Encyclopedia. And I'm gonna read through this one and we're gonna pretty much pick it out. Alright, so it begins right here. You know what? Let me grab some water real quick before I even start reading. Just give me 1 second, people. All right, and we begin. Excuse me. All right, the history of American slavery began long before the African arrived in Jamestown, 1619. Evidence from archaeologists and oral traditions indicates for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years prior, Native Americans had developed their own form of bondage. The fact should not be surprising, for most society throughout history have practiced slavery. Saying across cultural history, research on comparative compatibility, Catherine Cameron found the bonds people compose 10% or 70% of the population. Most society leading credence to Seymour Deutzer assertion that freedom, not slavery, was particular institution. If slavery is ambiguous, However, it is highly variable. Indigenous American slavery, rooted in warfare and diplomacy, was flexible, often offering its victims escape through adoption and intermarriage. Okay, keep that in mind. Intermarriage, and it was no, I'm sorry, and it yeah, it was divorced from racial identity, deeming all foreigners, men, women, and children of whatever color of nation potential slaves. All right, so that tells you right there. And like I said, when you start really reading this, you can pretty much pick apart what they saying. All right, so thus Europeans did not introduce slavery to North America. So they saying that the Europeans did not introduce slavery to America. All right, so it's a rather colonialism. It's a brought distant. It's a brought distant, involving notion of bondage into contact with one another. At times their slavery, their slavery clashed, but they also reinforced all influence one another. Colonists who had a voracious whatever demand for labor and export commodities, exploited indigenous networks and captivity exchange, producing a massive global commerce of Indian slaves. This began with the second voyage of Christopher Columbus in 1495 and extending parts of the Americas throughout the 20th century. During this part, between 2 and 4 million Indians were enslaved. Elsewhere in America, indigenous people adapted the Euro form of bondage in the southeast, an elite class of Indians. Now, when they tell you elite class of Indians, these are the Indians that's mixed with the Europeans, all right? The ones that they showed you, all right? It's saying an elite class. If they was telling you they enslaved 2 to 4 million Indians, why would they let a so-called elite class of Indians pass through? Okay? Because either that them are the ones that intermarried and allowed and just accepted the European ways, and they allowed them to keep their traditions as long as they was acting, as long as they was colonized. All right. So it tells you right here. All right. It said an elite class of Indians begin to hold African American. Now that's a freaking lie, because if they was already bringing slaves, all right. Now just think of it like this, right? It tells you 2 to 4 million Indians were slaves, and it's telling you from 1495. That's a lot of people for 500 years. That's a lot of people. You understand what I'm saying? They saying from 1495 to the 20th century. So that's like 495 years or something like that. So that's a lot of people, and you know their numbers. Either they're under or they're over. So they say 2 to 4. It could be anywhere from maybe 6 to 8, or maybe from 8 to 12. You never know. You know what I'm saying? You know, when I read that, I forgot the history from the history.com. It said that it was almost 50 million people throughout the Americas. So so they want to say African Americans, but yet they tell you 2 to 4 million Indians were enslaved. So if they was enslaving them, why would they need Africans? And if they were sending them to the Caribbeans, like I said, that's why he used this term ambiguous, because it's confusing when you start looking at it. If you telling me at the same time they was bringing the Africans, they was sipping out. Yo, it's just so me doing the research on this. At times I get so frustrated, I just shut down and I don't make a video for a minute. But at other time I just want to just keep making video. But sometimes when you get to this research, you just run into a brick wall because you really want to know what really happened. You know, and it's no way of really finding out. All I could do is cross-reference the different articles and the different research that I already did researched thus far. All right, so I'm gonna continue. So it say African American, the transgenerational slavery, and by the 1800s developed plantations that rival their white neighbors. The story of the Native American and slavery is complicated. Millions were victims, some were masters, and the nature of slavery changed over time and varied from one place to another. A significant and long overlooked aspect of American history, Indian slavery shaped colonial and exacerbated native population losses figure predominantly in warfare and politics, and influence native and colonial ideas about race identity. All right, so in here it tells you some truth about what we already know. At this point in time, we just trying to figure out, because you telling me you brought all these Africans here, and at the same time you was using the same people of the land to be slaves. Which one was it? Which one was it? You know what I'm saying? Which one was it? And why would you need to bring millions of Africans here if you had the indigenous people here? And then, it's just so many lies that they telling you. Because if this brother right here telling you he still is, his ancestors was here in the 1600s, man. Do you understand what that's telling you? His ancestors was here in the 1600s, and they was classified as Negroes. You understand? And that Walter Plecker didn't just do that in Virginia. That was a systematic thing that was done throughout the states. I mean, and this is what they was doing. Some people just gave up on, say, you know what? Fucking, I'm not trying to be a Native American no more, or I'm not trying to be an Aborigine no more. We done been stripped of our culture. We might as well just try to just either find a place of our own. Like, I mean, it was probably, you could just imagine. You could just imagine. So I'm gonna go into this other one. I'm gonna read this other article right here that I been wanting to research. Wanting to read for like a couple of weeks. All right, so this is a website that I found. This is www.indigenousamerican.com, and they got a couple of different. You got some good things. This DNA determines. I like this one. I'm gonna read this one probably in another video, but I'm gonna just keep it on Indian slavery right now. All right, and then also you got genetic analysis. Check through this, and I'm telling you, like, yeah. In some of this, he mentioned Moors, but look, man, just let that pass over your head. But just take the research that he already put together, all right, and so you can build upon what you're trying to build on as an Aborigine, all right. So here it is, say Indian native slavery in the colonies, all right. It say some accounts assist of American colonies of the 1600s. There was hundreds of thousands of Native Americans sold to slavery, all right. Now I'm gonna lift the font up a little bit because I don't like. Not the font, but alright, that's good right there. Alright, let me see. Alright, that's perfect. Alright, I say the black people sold on the slave market in the South during the 1600s were black people who lived right here in the hemisphere before the transatlantic slave trade existed. They were shipped to Central and South America. Native Americans or Indians were classified as Negroes and blacks in the slave books of the Seville, Spain. Now this is a good book right here. It says slaves from Terra Nova. All right, now that's something to write down, y'all. You should write that down, because in some of the pictures we seen with Vespucci and some of these other pictures we see Terra Nova on it. Okay, it says shows up in the slave market of Seville and Valencia very soon after the 1500s. For example, Valencia during the period of 1516, we found that in 1503 Miguel, Maine, in 1505 Juan and Pedro. In 1507, Antonio Juan Marco. In 1515, Ali. Now, Malcor in 1516, Catalina. They say they were classified as Negroes. If we were first brought to the Americas around 1619 or even 1555, for that matter, how were they taking slaves to the Newfoundland to Europe? All right, that's a good question. It say keep in mind one half of Native American either had hold up. Let me slow down. It say keep in mind that one of the Native Americans either had the name Ali. Now that's something we need to research and look up. All right. It say and It's saying all was classified as Negroes. Once they reached Valencia, it said, how did the Native Americans in 1515 have a Moorish named Ali? That's an interesting point. All right. It said global indigenous populations are referred to as Negroes. In Portuguese colony of Brazil, native were called Negroes de terra, meaning Negroes of the land. Now that's something to look up. See these terms. Look these terms up. Negroes de terra. Okay, meaning Negroes of the land. They say the early Virginia legislature identified Moors and Negroes separate. It say documentation exists which individuals was described as Negro Africans. All right, so he's saying that they specify Negro African. Columbus became the first man known in history to send the first slaves across the Atlantic. All right, keep that in mind. It say other nations rushed to basically duplicate or try to do the same thing that Columbus was doing. It's saying 1501 the Portuguese began to depopulate the Baiatuk Indians in Cape Verde as slaves. All right, remember the Portuguese also came to Puerto Rico. All right, so I say the black Indian slavery destroyed the Indian nation of the Natchez, the Yamasee, the Pequot. Because of this, the first African slave raid took place in 1505 and was spearheaded by Columbus' son. When the Moors, all right, now he's saying Moors and Indians, all right, so just let that pass over your head. And say Indians of the American begin dying and committing suicide. The labor was replaced with slaves from the Sahara in West Africa. All right, so it's saying that they started bringing other people. All right, so it's a historian notes that nowhere in their I'm sorry. Let me start that. Historians note that now here is there more authentic documentation that in South Carolina, also known as the original English colony of Carolina, established in 1670, between 1650 and 1730, at least 50,000 Indians and likely more due to transaction hitting to avoid paying government tariffs. All right, it's saying taxes were exported by the English alone into their Caribbean outposts. So they saying that they sent 50,000 Indians from 17 between this time right here, man. It's saying to the Caribbean. All right. So it's saying between 1670 and 1717. Far more Indians was exported than Africans imported. The southern coastal ring, entire tribes was exterminated through slavery compared to disease or war. Laws passed in 1704. Indians were conscripted to fight in wars for the colony long before American Revolution. The Indian slave trade covered an area from as far west and south as New Mexico, the Spanish territory northwest, the Great Lake. Historians believe that all tribes in the vast swath of the land were caught up in the slave trade in one way or another, either as captives or traded. Slavery was part of the larger strategy to depopulate the land. To depopulate the land to make way for European settlers. Okay. All right. As early as 1636, after the Pequot War, in which 300 Pequots were massacred, those who remained were sold to slavery. This is what the brother talking about. Sent to Bermuda. Majority slaving port included Boston and Salem, Mobile, and New Orleans. And for those port, Indians were shipped to Barbados by the English, Mantequa and Guadeloupe. I guess that's how you say it. They say by the French and the Antilles by the Dutch. Indian Native American slaves were also sent to the Bahamas as the breaking ground where they might have been transported back to New York and Antigua. All right, so that tells you something right there. All right, now I'm just saying this is something interesting I happen to run across, and like I said, I mean I'm absorbing what I can take from this article. All right, the Pequot War was no, I'm sorry, the Pequot War was an armed conflict between Pequot tribe and alliances of English colonists of Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, and Saybrook colonies and the Native American allies of, I can't pronounce that word, Mohegan tribe, which occurred between 1634 and 1638. The Pequot tribe lost the war. At the end, about 700 Pequots have been killed or taken into captivity. Hundreds of prisoners were sold to slavery and sent to the West Indians, and other survivors was dispersed. Now look, for those of y'all that came from the West Indians, all right? Now you tell me, do you see any indigenous so-called Indian-looking people there? Now, following we going with this, think about what you think the Native Americans look like now, today, or which most people think about. And do you see any of them type of people in the Caribbean? I'm not talking about the Indians, because we know that there was East Indians, which you see like the people, what they consider to be West Indian and Trinidadian and all. But we know that them original people was black. They only brought them people there to be slaves, all right? And these are the people that look like people from India, not American Native Americans, all right? It's two different. All right, but nonetheless, it say in the beginning, black and the Mongoloid Native Americans sold each other into slavery to provide the American and British with labor. After the Yamasee War in 1715, most Native American slaves came back to the Black, Chickasaw, Cree, and Chickasaw Yamasee Nation, etc. In this way, they could deny the fact that black Native Americans ever existed. See? They say, if not the art of, all right, let me start that over. If not for the art of artificial record dating back to the period, black Native Americans will still be invisible. The presence of the mtDNA, I remember that, HGNNA, it say, and the Y chromosome, HGR1B and A1 testify as ancient African present in America. The historical record indicates in perception that Indians did not make good slaves when they were shipped. See, hold up. See, look. Let me stop right there. Remember, this is what they tell you, because if you find out that there was millions of so-called Indian slaves, you're going to start asking yourself, well, hold up. I don't see no Indians nowhere else that don't know who they are. The only people I see that don't know who they are Negroes. Because everybody else that's on this land, like I said, man, listen, you got to really think about that. Think about that. Now they're telling you that it was millions of so-called Native Americans sold in slavery and sent to the Caribbeans, but yet you don't see none of these people in the Caribbean. The only people you see in the Caribbean are Negro. And then they say, oh, we traded them. All they did was trade the indigenous Aborigines from the Caribbean for indigenous Aborigines in North America. All right? Now, let me go back into this one and we done. The historical record indicates a perception that Indians did not make slaves. It's a when they were shipped far from their home territories to easily escape and were given refuge by other Indians, if not their own communities. It say they died in high numbers on the transatlantic journey. All right, now they telling you they died large in the transatlantic journey. Now this is the millions of so-called Aborigines that died, because they talking about millions of so-called Africans died, but they telling you that a high number of so-called Aborigines died in the transatlantic journey. All right, now the transatlantic, okay? Now that's the difference. I think the transatlantic was basically when they came here, they was taking people throughout the Atlantic. Alright, remember that there was 3 different types of slavery. There was slavery, which was dealing with Slavics. Then there was the transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade was dealing with Aboriginal people being shipped around the world. Then it was the African slave trade. Alright? So understand that. And they could not be bringing millions of so-called Africans here when they already had millions of so-called Indians as slaves. Now, this will start making you figure, because some of them slaves had to be recycled and put back on some of these other Indian reservations. All right? So let me continue. It say journey and stumble easily to European disease. It say by 1676, Barbados had banned Indian slavery, citing too bloody and dangerous inclinations to remain here. All right, so some of the brother references right here, you can check it out. I'm gonna put this in the link. I'm gonna put in a link so you guys can check it out and just run through, because I don't have the time to run through everything. But I'm just gonna go through one article at a time and just look at it like that or whatever though. But this one right here got some good information: the DNA determination and the genetic analysis. So you know, man, hopefully y'all enjoyed this video, man. I'll be trying to just keep it as forward as possible, to where you people can just get a brief understanding of what really happened and what transpired over here in this country, man. Because it's so ambiguous and it's so vague when you hear people talk about Native American, but yet the original Aborigines was the people who suffered all of the atrocities in the Northeast and in the Southeast. Like I said, you know what I'm saying, and they give these so-called, they give this stuff to these mongoloids, which they never even experienced it, and that's the reason why they don't even, that's the reason why they're not even upset, because they're getting paid anyway. And meanwhile, we've been classified as Negroes, and you can't even find out who you was. All you can remember what your grandmother or if somebody told you, because I speak to a lot of Negroes who family never told them that. So with that being said, man, hopefully y'all enjoyed this, man. I'm out, man. Peace.